tonight we're going to talk, as we have been in the past. We talked for 2 or 3 months about the beginning shooter, and last month we talked about redefining focus and how different people perceive things as their focus gets redefined. Many of you contributed, and Vicki's going to run through a couple of those things in just a minute, but since Jeff is about to get ready to get on an airplane, I want to go over some of the things that he sent me in relation to what he felt like intermediate shooters are going to have to do. Now, Jeff, I'm going to read it and let you explain it. What does the intermediate shooter have to do to become an advanced shooter? I know there comes a point when you have to learn that in order to be a great shooter, there are things you have to do and things you have to know. A beginning shooter is or should be learning the know things. Know how to mount your gun, know where to look for the target, know how to pick a good break point. They're learning what to do. They're not necessarily doing it right consistently, but they're attempting to learn what to do. The intermediate shooter would have the knowledge and would need to work on the doing part. Do the same thing consistently, learn to simplify their process and action, do all the things that make it easy for them to apply the knowledge they have. Do have the same short pre-shot routine. Do have a planned preload. Do rely on the same process every time. Do you have anything you can expound on that with, Jeff?
I think I've inverted a do and a no there once or twice, but the general gist of it was that I think if you look at people who are learning how to shoot, you have to learn a lot of different things, right? And sometimes we focus on what we know, right? You have to remember that you use 7.5 shot on that particular bird, or
right.
You have to pick up or shoot something this way or that way. And it's not so much that you have to have all that knowledge, but that you have to be able to apply it, right? So you pick all that up as you're a new shooter, and as you're evolving into a better intermediate shooter, now you know all that stuff, right? You don't have to think about what shot I'm going to use. You don't have to think about where I'm going to pick up the target. That information is more obvious to you. It's more apparent to you when you just look at what the situation is, and you're more focused on what's happening in the process, right? Did I do it exactly the same way each time? Did I move exactly the way I'm supposed to? You know, those sorts of things. So it's more about your process. You're more learning your process and perfecting your process. And you can't do that until you have the basic knowledge, right? You can't start teaching someone that when they're a basic shooter because they don't have the basic knowledge.
Welcome to
so the process would make the process would make sense.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna continue with that. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good flight and a happy landing. Okay, I think what Jeff is describing is the journey that you go through of learning certain things that pertain to you. Everybody has preconceived notions when they come into this game, which is the secret to being a great coach. You have to be able to spot a preconceived notion immediately and learn how to humorize it with a little added sarcasm, make people realize the futility of their preconceived notion and begin to impart knowledge to them. In the beginner, it's like you're giving them knowledge like putting gas in a car. In the intermediate, you're sharing ideas, you're encouraging them to push through the thresholds that they're going to have to push through to cement what they know and and they have to have a foundation to build on what they know. As an advanced shooter, it's more you're sharing ideas with an advanced shooter. And we'll get into this in another month or two, but the advanced shooter is in the 80s, and if you're shooting 85, you have the ability to shoot 95. You already have that. What you don't have is the experience at a level of shooting 85 consistently, because it's not like the top scores bring the bottom scores up. It's the bottom scores that push the top scores higher. So when you get into the intermediate level, and I'm defining an intermediate level shooter as a 68 to 79 shooter, a real average. And last month we closed out the hour talking a little bit, getting some views from Shane and from several of you, and I'd like for Vicki to kind of review those briefly, and then we'll go on to what we're going to talk about tonight.
Okay. The last question that we talked about last month was what the intermediate shooter needs to learn. And Rick said travel, shoot variety of targets, and experience different target setters so that you have a good experience and a good variety. Dennis said set some goals. If it's not working, you can always change it. Be ready to change if it's not working. And Shane, he said refine the process, reclassify issues that aren't really glaring, hoping and learning, identify areas you don't excel at, be very attentive to your personal life, the food you ate, etc., identify areas to work on, and what did I learn from each shot. Remove your negative emotions. The biggest thing I think he said was that there are no shortcuts. It's a 5-year commitment, which we have always talked about. It's hard work. You step back, you find out what you need to work on, and then you go and work on it. There is no magic pill, unfortunately. He did stress how much the log was important, and I think that anybody that you talk to that's a more advanced shooter, that's going to be their big thing. I know that Gary Davidson has gone back to that and said that his log was very important. He keeps going back over and reading on it.
I think everybody on the hour tonight would agree with that. The people that end up showing up in this coaching hour are the ones that we feel like give the greatest commitment to get better, because there's a synergy in what goes on this coaching hour that's really important, and it's getting better and better and better. And we've got a great nucleus of people that constantly go through their successes with us, and it makes it real. John Eagle, do you have any thoughts on what it takes to get through the intermediate phase of shooting? Do you classify yourself as an intermediate shooter, or in between intermediate and advanced, or advanced? What would you classify yourself?
Well, I'd classify myself in between beginning and intermediate.
I would say that you were a little bit better than that.
I was quiet last week thinking, or last time thinking, well, I don't know, what does work? And I think I certainly agree you have to see and experience more. You see so many people shoot that get into a tunnel of, 50-mile radius, guerrilla marketing, and when they go outside of that zone, they're just lost. And so you have to, you said that to me a long time ago. There's some things you can only learn with a number on your back, but you got to have a fancy number. You got to go places. And I would say for an intermediate shooter, it's important to remember that what got you there is what will get you further, as long as it keeps getting better and more efficient. And so just because you get to a certain place, I remember reading Craig Hill talking about, guys have forgotten the basics. They've forgotten the fundamentals. They don't do any work on them. And then they wonder why their scores are low. And to me, it just seems like it is a feeling of accomplishment, and you get there, but it's not like you can check a box and never have to look at that again.
Constantly revisiting fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it pays off. I'll tell you, I have had a little aha here. I have 2 guns, and one of them has way lighter barrels. And I was, just really worried about, gosh, you must be in the wrong place because you're not getting there. And once you start to figure out, what the problem is, that when you see the problem, hi, I know what I'm doing, now fix this, and somehow you can't. And it was like, well, going back to the basics, the barrels are too light, not as much momentum, takes a different setup. I can't think about stuff like that, but that's where it was, and I would have been lost this year if I hadn't figured that out kind of early.
Yeah. Listening or observing the problems without getting mad at them is huge. Being able to see the positive in a mistake. Being patient enough to turn something that's adverse into something that is either neutral or positive. It is what it is. It's amazing. If you don't love this game, you need to quit, because there's never been anybody that's been really great at this game that didn't absolutely love it. And I don't know how many times I've said how much I love doing what I do now and shooting this game. And if you don't love it, you might as well quit.